Most visitors walk past these ruins without giving them a second thought. They are usually described as an old amphitheater, but is that really what they are? To find the answer, we turn to archival maps, historic photographs, and original documents, and the deeper we explored the history of this place, the more unexpected discoveries we made. On the southwestern edge of Poland, in the Lower Silesian Voivodeship, near the city of Wartburg, stands Książ Castle, one of the largest and most famous castles in the country. For centuries, it was the residence of the Hochberg family. Around the castle, they created an extensive landscape park with roads, bridges, gardens, and numerous service buildings. But the story we are about to uncover lies beyond the castle itself. Along one of the marked trails below Książ Castle lies a place that many visitors pass without knowing its history. Today, it is commonly referred to as the ruins of an amphitheater. Yet historical maps, old photographs, and archival documents reveal that this site has served very different purposes over the years. Together, we'll trace how this site changed over the decades, guided by archival documents, historic maps, and photographs. The history of Książ Castle begins in the 13th century. Over the centuries, not only the castle itself changed, but also the surrounding landscape. A large estate gradually developed around the castle, supporting the daily life of the entire residence. The site where the amphitheater ruins stand today formed part of this estate. A flax processing building once stood here, where flax was prepared before being made into cloth. A small pond lay beside it. Water was essential for processing flax, so the two formed a single working complex. The earliest cartographic source found so far that marks both features is a plan from 1783. On it, the flax processing building is labeled brick house, and the pond reticule. The flax processing house and the pond were only two parts of a much larger estate. The map drawn in 1783 shows that this area was carefully organized. Nearby stood an underground ice house, where ice collected during winter was stored to keep food cold throughout the warmer months. On one side of the road stretched a large wooded garden. On the other, the hillside had been shaped into a series of terraces connected by walking paths that followed the natural contours of the slope. This was no longer just a working corner of the estate. Utility buildings, gardens, and walking paths formed a single landscape around the castle, where every part had its own purpose. But this landscape would not remain unchanged. Over the decades that followed, some buildings disappeared, others were rebuilt, and entirely new structures began to appear. Step by step, this part of the Książ estate began to take on a completely different appearance. In the 1790s, new walking paths were laid out on the hillside surrounding Książ Castle, and like the older estate roads, these paths followed the natural shape of the terrain, winding between trees, rocks, and steep slopes as visitors walked. The landscape gradually revealed itself, one view after another. Small architectural features appeared along these routes. Historical records mention a grotto, a Swiss-style cottage, and a circular pavilion inspired by ancient Greek architecture. These additions changed the purpose of the surrounding landscape. It was no longer designed only to support the castle's daily life, but also to create an experience for those exploring the grounds. One of the most unusual additions appeared nearby between 1794 and 1797. Today it is known as Old Książ. At first sight, it looks like the remains of an earlier medieval castle. In fact, this ruined appearance was deliberately created as part of the Romantic Park. The building was designed by the artist and architect Christian Wilhelm Tischbein and was styled to resemble an old 500 Gothic stronghold. Today, creating an artificial ruin may seem like a strange idea, but at the end of the 18th century, it became one of the defining features of Romantic landscape design across Europe. Ruined castles, ancient temples, and Gothic towers were built on purpose to make visitors feel that they had stepped into a place filled with history. Old Książ was created according to the same idea. It was never intended to deceive people into believing it was a genuine medieval fortress. Instead, it was designed to evoke the atmosphere of the distant past and become part of the journey through the park. As the grounds around Książ Castle continued to develop, Another remarkable building appeared. It was an orangery, long before modern greenhouses existed. This building protected delicate plants from the harsh Silesian winters. Orange and lemon trees spent the coldest months inside its walls before being moved outdoors again in spring. Today, not far from the ruins of the amphitheater, the remains of this building can still be found, hidden among the trees. They are one of the few surviving traces of a place that once sheltered exotic plants for Książ Castle. An orangery was far more than a place to protect plants from winter. For the owners of Książ, it demonstrated wealth, prestige, and access to rare species that could not survive outdoors in the Silesian climate. At the beginning of the 20th century, the castle gardens underwent another major transformation. The horticultural complex was moved to nearby Lubiał, a village belonging to the Książ estate. There, a large palm house was built, the special glass building designed to grow tropical and exotic plants that could not survive outdoors in the Silesian climate. The old orangery was mainly used to shelter plants during the winter. The new palm house was a much larger complex designed to grow and maintain an extensive collection of exotic plants. The hollow where the flax processing house and its pond had once stood was converted into a tennis court. For the first time in its history, this part of the estate was no longer used for work, but for leisure and recreation. Tennis was a relatively new sport. During the second half of the 19th century, it spread rapidly among the European aristocracy and became especially popular in Great Britain. Before long, the trend reached some of the grandest noble residences in Central Europe. For more than 4 centuries, Książ Castle belonged to the Hochberg family, one of the wealthiest and most influential aristocratic dynasties in the region. Under their ownership, the medieval fortress gradually evolved into a magnificent residence, while the surrounding forests and estate grounds were transformed into an extensive landscaped park with terraces, gardens, pavilions, and walking paths. Many of the places we have already explored in this film were created or extensively redesigned during the Hochberg's era. One of the most famous members of the family was Princess Daisy. Born in England, she arrived at Książ Castle after marrying Prince Hans Heinrich XV von Hochberg in 1891. Daisy grew up in a country where lawn tennis had already become an essential part of upper-class social life. The presence of a tennis court beside Old Książ therefore reflected the new leisure traditions that gradually became part of life at the castle in the early 20th century. The tennis court was carefully integrated into the existing landscape. The playing surface was laid out within the natural depression that had once been occupied by the pond. The surrounding slopes formed natural boundaries, allowing the new feature to blend into the historic park without significantly altering its overall appearance. Over the course of a century and a half, this single location changed its purpose several times. It began as a working area with a flax mill and a pond. Later, it became part of the landscape park designed for leisurely walks. By the early 20th century, it had been transformed into a place for recreation and tennis. But this chapter of its history would not last long. The outbreak of the Second World War once again changed the fate of this site. A new phase of reconstruction was about to begin, one whose traces still define much of its appearance today. The years that followed completely changed the fate of Książ Castle. The peaceful life of the residents came to an end. A place where people had recently strolled through park pathways, relaxed in the gardens, and played tennis would soon become part of one of Nazi Germany's largest and most secret construction projects. The project was given the codename Riese, the German word for giant. Between 1943 and 1945, a vast network of underground tunnels and massive engineering structures began to take shape around Książ Castle and in the nearby All Mountains, a mountain range in Lower Silesia. To this day, historians continue to debate the project's true purpose. Some believe it was intended to become Adolf Hitler's new headquarters. Others argue that the underground complex was designed for secret military industries. There is also the view that it was meant to serve several purposes at once, since a large portion of the original documents was destroyed at the end of the war. No definitive answer has ever been found. In 1944, Książ Castle was officially incorporated into Project Riese. Large-scale construction took place not only inside the castle itself but also throughout the surrounding grounds. Workers excavated underground tunnels, built new roads, technical facilities, and other infrastructure required to support the project. The construction relied heavily on forced labor. Satellite camps of the Grossrosen concentration camp operated in the Książ area, and prisoners were sent to the construction sites every day. Thousands of people worked under brutal conditions, and many never survived. The military construction also transformed the castle park. Areas that had once been used for leisurely walks and recreation became major construction sites. Parts of the landscape were completely reshaped, while elements of the historic park disappeared forever. It was during this period that the tennis court vanished. No surviving document records exactly when it was dismantled or buried. However, later changes in the terrain and subsequent site plans clearly show that the original layout of this area was destroyed during the wartime reconstruction. But the tennis court was far from the only engineering facility in this part of the estate. Nearby stood another structure that was once an essential part of the castle's daily operation. It was Książ Castle's own gasworks. During the second half of the 19th century, gaslighting spread rapidly across Europe. Large palaces, country estates, and industrial complexes increasingly built their own gasworks instead of relying on external suppliers. Gas was primarily used to illuminate castle buildings, service facilities, and park pathways. Today, only concrete foundations, brick walls, and fragments of its engineering structures remain. Without knowing its history, it is difficult to imagine the important role this place once played in the life of the vast Książ estate. These ruins are now almost completely hidden among the trees. Most visitors walk past them without realizing they are looking at part of Książ Castle's former utility infrastructure, another reminder of how complex and self-sufficient this great estate once was. But let's return to the place where our investigation began. After the war, the former tennis court took on yet another role, thanks to the natural slope of the terrain. It began to be used as an open-air venue for public events. It was during this period that the name amphitheater gradually became associated with this place. However, that name is not entirely accurate. In reality, no classical amphitheater, like those known since the time of ancient Rome, was ever built here. Instead, the existing slope and the former tennis court were simply adapted to host concerts and other public events. In official documents and publications, this place was more commonly referred to as the forest stage. For many years, it hosted concerts, theatrical performances, festivals, and public celebrations, attracting thousands of spectators. Over time, the forest stage was expanded and modernized. After the reconstruction, its seating area could accommodate around 1,500 spectators. For an open-air venue located deep within the castle park, this was an impressive capacity. For many years, the forest stage remained one of the main venues for cultural events in the area surrounding Książ Castle. Gradually, however, its importance began to decline. Concerts and performances became less frequent, the facilities fell out of use, and nature slowly reclaimed the site. Today, the former stage is gradually being swallowed by the forest. Among the trees, visitors can still make out the remains of stone walls, stairways, and concrete structures. These are the ruins that most visitors now know simply as the amphitheater. But our investigation revealed that this place preserves the memory of several completely different eras. It began as the site of a flax-breaking house and a small pond. Later, it became part of a romantic landscape park with winding walking paths. Then the Hochberg family's tennis court, and after the Second World War, the forest stage. Today, only faint traces of most of these structures remain, yet old maps, archival documents, historic photographs, and the surviving ruins make it possible to reconstruct their story and reveal how one small corner of the castle park was transformed again and again throughout its long history.